Final meeting of our term. It's the November regular monthly meeting for the Board of Finance. It's the end of this term. Before we get started tonight, I would like to congratulate all the returning members of our board on their election victories last night. Well deserved, and congratulations. We're also next month going to be welcoming Mr. David Becker. We congratulate him on his win. And Mr. Bolito, this is the swan song, so I'm going to ask you to take us out with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you very much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Tonight's agenda has 5 items on it, 2 bonding resolutions, the first one being from approving a grant from the Department of Transportation for improvements in the Commerce Drive Kings Highway area, appropriating $1.2 million for the cost of such project and authorizing the issuance of $1.2 million in bonds to fund such appropriation. I believe the net impact of this to the town is about $240,000, though, correct, Mr. Mayor? Correct. After reimbursement from the DOT. Item number 2 is to hear and consider and act upon a resolution authorizing the appropriation of $12.5 million to refund certain of the town's outstanding bonds and authorizing the issuance of refunding bonds to finance such appropriation. And this is an item that we've done in the past. It gives authorization to the administration to take advantage of favorable interest rates to refinance some of our obligations, up to $12.5 million of those debt obligations. And if I am correct in reading the resolution appropriately, this does not, however, extend the lives of those bond appropriations, correct?
Correct.
So we're not pushing off the payments. We're taking advantage of better interest rates should they become available, and we're giving the administration the ability to act upon that. Item number 3, to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to approve transfers of department overdrafts as of June 30th, 2013. This is cleanup of last year's budget. I'm sure there'll be some discussions there. Item number 4, to hear, consider, and act upon the request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to approve Schedules A, B, C, D, E, and F, carrying over funds for encumbrances and reappropriations as of June 30th, 2013, supported by purchase orders and letters of request from department heads or the Chief Fiscal Officer. Again, cleanup of prior year's appropriations. This is a recurring item year after year. Happy to note that several of the prior year's items are off of this, and this is now dealing mainly with 2013 funds. Then we have a holdover item from our September meeting. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $100,000 from the IT Department contingency account to the IT fees and professional services. You will all remember this item from prior meetings and from our budget discussions. And the last item, item 6, is to hear, consider, and act upon any communications, and I'll just tell you I know of nothing for that item right now. With that is our agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none, I'll go to item number 1, to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution approving a grant from the Department of Transportation for improvement in the Commerce Drive Kings Highway area, appropriating $1.2 million for the cost of such project and authorizing the issuance of $1.2 million in bonds to fund such appropriation. I will note that this was approved by the Board of Selectmen earlier today. Yes, Mr.
Do we have minutes to approve?
Not for this evening's meeting. We'll do that next meeting. Okay? Thank you. Yep.
Was it unanimous, the vote?
Yes. Yes, it was. Yes, Mrs. Albin, can you do that, please? Do I have a second? Okay, the item is now before us. Please, Mr. Hurley, go right ahead.
Okay, good evening. I'm Bill Hurley, the engineering manager for the town. Before you is an enhancement grant where the town gets reimbursed for basically sidewalk and pedestrian and bicycle improvements in the Kings Highway near the metro station area. The background would be the town, with the cooperation of the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, has applied for and has received conditional approval for a reimbursement grant application for alternative means of transportation regarding bicycle pedestrian improvements near the Metro Train Center. Engineering, DPW, Housing and Development have received numerous requests to improve and encourage walking and biking in the area. Residents, commuters, members of the Fairfield Bike and Pedestrian Coalition, a few RTM members have asked for sidewalk improvements and additional sidewalks and bicycle amenities along Black Rock Turnpike, Commerce Drive, Kings Highway neighborhoods, and stated so at a very well-attended public informational meeting held here on June 27th, 2013. In order to proceed with the grant project, the town must sign a resolution, a commitment letter endorsing the up to $1.2 million project that involves 80% reimbursement for the project. The main construction components would be concrete sidewalks, concrete curbs, ADA-compliant handicap ramps, investigate bicycle routes, install bicycle amenities such as bike racks. There'd be signs, pavement markings, and an area for bike parking. Also included could be some median improvements to create a more friendly pedestrian environment. Some of these sidewalks will have to be replaced soon. And eventually, like in a 10-year timeline, most of the sidewalks would have to be repaired or replaced based on their existing condition. As mentioned previously, on June 27th of this year, the town held an informal public meeting to gauge the interest of the project. Over 20 people attended, and another 5 responded via email favorably to the project. There were no objections to the project at the meeting. And a matter of fact, they wanted the town to expand the project to include Berwick, Fairchild Avenue, and Castle Avenues. The description of the project would be the project area covering Kings Highway East from Chambers Street to Brentwood Avenue, with extensions along Kings Highway East, Chambers Street, Commerce Drive, and Berwick and Brentwood Avenues if funding allows. Sidewalks would be built on the north and the south sides with some median improvements. The bicycle amenities would be included. If you want, I could show on a map if anyone is unfamiliar with the area. Okay.
Please.
Pretty much here, the Staples Plaza, the famous or infamous Exit 24 circle. Using some local knowledge here, here's the Miller Buick Place. There's Chambers Street right here. The new train station is down over in this area. Commerce Drive is along here. But for the most part, the majority of the project would be from Kings Highway, from Chambers Street to Brentwood Avenue. If there are some additional, basically we're going to back into the grant. Essentially, they have an allotment already for the money. So how the project will go as far as the grant money will take us. If it enables us, we would extend it a little bit further down Kings Highway. We would connect, there's a gap in the existing sidewalk on Chambers Street and also on Brentwood Avenue. And so that's where most of the sidewalk and pedestrian improvements would be. The bicyclists, we could establish a bike route, whether it be along Commerce Drive or along Kings Highway. We could do signing and pavement markings, and as I said, right by the area of the train station, we could do some bicycle enhancements there as well.
Bill, so I'm sorry, but where are the sidewalks going to be again? Show me, so there's Staples there, right?
Well, the Staples is here. This is
Okay.
Miller.
Yep.
If you're familiar with that. From there, and they would go along Kings Highway East to Brentwood. There used to be, I think, Grotto's Deli there.
Stratos.
And,
Yeah.
I think Mercalio's market is there as well. St. Emery's Church. So that's the area that we're referring to. The area right now has about a 1-inch curb. In some spots, the curb is missing. There's a lot of potholes and cracks, which again, we can kind of Band-Aid for a couple more years here and there, but for the most part, the area definitely needs improvement, and a lot of the sidewalks are so old that they don't even have ramps that go down for And it's not even just the handicapped people, it could be anybody with a stroller or visually impaired, you know, to help them traverse the intersections.
And are they both, are you looking at both sides of the street, or just?
Yes, the north and the south side. We can do, again, if funding allows, we could do crosswalk enhancements. We can do signage. We can do we'll definitely do the tactile strips that are required by the federal government. And keep in mind, too, that for this grant, there's going to be a lot of paperwork and requirements associated with it. By basically using the Kings Highway area, otherwise known as Route 1, they're going to have state requirements anyway. So even if we don't go to the grant, we're going to have to go through all this stuff anyway to do a lot of the work. So the project would include the design, the construction, and the inspection for the project. And as I said before, it really will amount on the bids and the estimates on how far we can go with the grant. To also let everyone know, we try to use a zoning mechanism and some other things that have popped up. DPW and zoning work together, and you might remember the Stonegate or Whole Foods, those development projects, they were required by zoning to have new sidewalks. So that's why Kings Highway East, a lot of that has already been done. The DPW finished the one little section in the middle. So at least that whole section is pretty much done on that. Another thing that in cooperation with the engineering department and the state, we found out that there was really no way for these people north of the turnpike to even cross Route 1 to get to the train station. We were able to convince the state DOT to put in pedestrian light and the electrical and the traffic, you know, the traffic light don't walk and walk signals for Route 1. And then the condition would be that the town DPW would construct the handicap ramps. So we thought that was a great idea, and we worked together and got that improvement. And then, you know, same thing if there's further developments along, you know, certain stretches, that's another way that we can, quote, extend the grant. You know. So, as I said, there were over 25 people that had supported the project, and there wasn't even a single person that were opposed. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Do we have questions from board members? We'll go to Mr. Bolito first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the sidewalks on Kings Highway, you know, past Miller and up that way, okay? We would have to do it anyway, so it makes sense to use grant money to do it now. Understand that the sidewalks around the Metro Center are pretty much new and installed, so that's done. Talk to me about the bike routes, and talk to me about how you think this project is going to encourage people to either walk or bike to the train station.
The Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has submitted a document that the Board of Selectmen have, I believe, approved that highlights certain roads in town and certain areas in town that they would like to see bicycle improvements to. So the train station area was definitely one of them. And so we have not, right now we have not pinpointed exactly where these bicycle improvements would be. Right now it's a generic statement. We wanted to talk to the public, make sure we got the approvals, and then we would be a little bit more descriptive in that, in terms of the exact location. What I'd like to do is to get a little bit more public feedback of what areas or what streets they would like to see and where we have support. The only formal bike route that we have in town right now is the recently installed Mill Plain Road. You might remember that from the summer with the Health Department grant. And we worked with the neighborhood on that and had gotten support, and I think overall it's been a success. So that's the same model we would like to use on this area.
Right. But the way you're sounding is that that's more in the future, that's pending more feedback. Really what you're focusing on initially is the
Yeah, right.
sidewalks.
If I had a guess of all the money set aside for the bicycle improvements, and again, a lot of it is the amenities and stuff, so which we could put more bike racks at the train station, stuff like that. Off the top of my head, I'd probably say about 5 to maybe at most 10% would be for the bicycle improvements. We try to keep it in that range.
Right.
And then in terms of the signs and the pavement markings, it's a relatively small amount. If I had to take a quick guess, I'd say maybe $30,000 to $50,000 at most would be allotted for that.
Okay.
So
The one thing I'm having a hard time getting my arms around is the whole point of the grant and the program is to encourage people to bike, walk, and use public transportation. Where you're talking about putting the sidewalks, it doesn't make sense to me because of the fact that the Metro Center's on the other side of 95. Explain to me how putting sidewalks in on that stretch of Kings Highway by Miller and by Drodos and all that is going to encourage people to walk and or bike to the Metro Center.
well, you have to remember also that in current stages of planning, and I believe they've been approved, we do have two affordable housing or projects on, let's say, Fairchild.
Right.
Okay, and without being decondescending or whatever that word is, where this is a relatively middle class or a little bit lower in terms of economic, family economics area, that those are the people that are going to use the sidewalks more, maybe they can't afford the parking.
That
permits,
makes
or maybe
sense.
they don't have cars. So that's where a lot of this came through. The other thing, just to let you know, on this this grant, we had applied for it the last 5 or 6 years, and finally we were awarded it this year. As I mentioned before, when the very beginnings of the grant, we were really looking at the Commerce Drive and Kings Highway East area, and now that we've got those areas done, we decided to expand.
Right.
There was definitely a need, and as I said before, the roads that people wanted to see more sidewalks on, all the people in attendance were Berwick, Fairchild, Castle Avenue, and Kings Highway.
Right.
So there's definitely the
No, I
connection
get
there.
that.
And,
I guess, again-
now whether they're all going to go to the train station, that might be
No, I get
being
that.
honest, stretching it a little bit, but from my understanding is, and even going out there a couple times, I do have pictures if anyone wanted to see them of the conditions of the sidewalk. But even going out there, you do see, some pedestrian activity
Right.
along there.
I guess the sidewalks on Kings Highway make sense. The sidewalks Commerce Drive, the other side of Kings Highway makes sense. You got me on that. What the missing piece is for me is what's getting you from Miller Nissan underneath 95 to the train station, because that's probably one of the poor.
Well, yeah. and I should have drawn. We do have a map of existing sidewalks in town and the gaps that are associated with it, and I can at least highlight here that along again the Route 1 area. Okay, there's sidewalks all the way along. You can walk now underneath the turnpike here. There is a sidewalk there. Okay, and you can go towards what I call the Lexus and cross now.
Right.
That was that new signal. The other thing is, and again, just an example of currently there's a proposal in front of the TPZ where Lexus is going to do an addition. And so now that whole section there will be replaced. The sidewalk will be replaced. So we'll have a whole section right from Miller. You would walk, you'd go across these crosswalks here with signalized crosswalks, come down, get onto Kings Highway East, and then go to the traffic light by Stonebridge and cross over that way. So there's definitely one there. The other would be Chambers Street. Right now, there's a couple of small gaps along
Right.
Chambers Street, and we would do that. If we ran out of the grant money there, it's a small enough area that DPW could probably put within their regular, yearly fiscal budget to do that work. And so therefore, we would connect that. And then again, if funding allowed, we could also connect Brentwood. And then from there, you pop out by, Pepe's Pizza area there.
Right.
And then sidewalks along Commerce Drive. So they would be all, or they would all be connected.
Well, I appreciate that. That actually ties it in for me, because having that connection between the two different sides of Kings Highway and with Commerce Drive is kind of what I was missing, so you explained that well. I appreciate that.
And your question was one of the highlights with the bike and pedestrian. The study that was done is obviously the train tracks throughout the whole town, and I-95 and Route 1 are probably the biggest hurdles for the people who live north of those features or structures to get to the south of town. And the same thing with the bicyclists. And so we're trying to pick a little bit less busier roads that would invite more of that activity to go from north to south, especially, you know, when we get closer into the downtown area and the beach area as well.
Anybody else? Mrs. Leclerc?
Have you gone to the police department to have them review it for safety? Will you?
For this particular grant, not per se, but the Chief McNamara and some of the police officers were a member of the pedestrian advisory group, and so they are definitely familiar with that and the proposals and the report. So they're I would have to say they're truly on board with it.
Okay.
If you want, I can, you know, do a double check. But,
Right,
I'd be shocked if they weren't.
No, I just, as long as we're doing all this work, I want to make it as safe as possible. Can I ask a couple of, or?
Feel free.
And are we guaranteed already to receive 80% of whatever we spend? Like, so if we spend the full $1.2 million, we'll be reimbursed for 80%?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That would be the case, because what will happen is, you know, through the whole grant process, is this is just the first one that like kicks it off. Then there's like there'll be a design resolution, then there'll be a construction resolution. If there's a right-of-way, there'll be a right-of-way resolution. So unfortunately, we've tried in the past to do a resolution and then, you know, try to cover it all, but the state always wants us to come back. So unfortunately, I'll be back again probably at least once, probably twice more on each phase of the project here, just hopefully as a formality, since all the grant monies would be approved. So.
Okay. And so we'll only be reimbursed as we spend the money then?
Right, so if the project for some reason only came out to be $1 million, we would only get the $800,000 back.
Okay.
That would be correct. The goal usually is to get as close as you can without going over, as Bob Barker used to say.
Okay, and then my other question is, what is the estimated useful life of like a sidewalk and the improvements that you're going to make?
That's a good question. We're aiming to do the concrete sidewalks, so my guess would be is looking around the area, and I mean, these are probably done in the 50s and 60s, so my guess would be for the concrete sidewalk, you should be able to get between 40 and 50 years, and if you push it, maybe 60 years.
Okay, and that's what the bulk of this project is actually?
Yeah,
concrete
the bulk of
sidewalks?
it is for pedestrian improvements. There might be a little bit of landscaping, you know, streetscaping associated with it. We talked about median improvements. They're wonderful asphalt islands right in the middle of Route 1 there. We might even look at, even if there's a possibility of eliminating most of them outside of having a couple where the pedestrians would cross as a pedestrian shelter. Otherwise, we try to see if we could get rid of that in the design phase. But of course, that would require the state DOT approval.
Okay.
But they may want to get rid of them as well. So if there's an opportunity, we'll try to do that. And then that would also be a beautification, you know, to go along with this. But the main purpose is for alternate transportation modes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Absolutely, Mr. Brockfield.
Thanks, Bill. I mean, I'm always inclined to want to approve anything that gives us $1.2 million worth of work for $240,000. So my question simply is, and you alluded to this at the beginning, the sidewalk work, would you say there's no question that that's at least $240,000 worth of work that we would have had to do over the next couple of years anyway?
Correct.
I'm not even looking at the 1.2,
Yep,
just
correct.
the 240.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, I do have a couple of follow-ups. Real quick, following up on Mr. Brockfeld's question. in that area where the sidewalks are being put, there's some buildings that are abandoned or slash dilapidated slash, there's been discussion about rehabbing those addresses. Do we know what, A, the status of that is, and B, I would hate to see you guys spend this grant money to put down a sidewalk in front of that, then have it all ripped up as they do construction in those properties. So, what do we know about that, and how's that type of thing coordinated?
Unfortunately, I don't know the exact specifics of what, each individual property is. Part of the project would involve surveying, and we, as I said before, we have a good rapport with the zoning, so we could at least find out if there's any projects being developed on that part.
And I see we do have the first...
Mark Barnhart, Housing and Economic Development Director, he's definitely involved in this as well, and so if there are some of those issues that may or may not come up, he'll certainly be one of the first people in town, to hear about it. But if an individual house is like dilapidated, there's nothing we could do to prevent that. However, there are some things that can be done that we've done in the past. We had a safe routes to school sidewalk project, and when we got wind that there was a developer doing that work in the area there, we actually postponed or delayed the project for a couple of months to allow them to do the work. But that was work that our town DPW did, not a contractor, so it might get a little...
And I think these are larger commercial properties in that area along that road that are...
Well, the other thing, too, is by doing the sidewalks, we would do the concrete we would do the driveway apron.
Right.
And by reinforcing that, and when I did my site visit, I noticed in front of the delis that I had mentioned before that a combination of maybe lack of parking or people feel a little bit safe. Let me get 2 wheels on the road, but 2 on the sidewalk. In those areas, we could do reinforced or a rebar in the sidewalk so that they wouldn't chew it up. But as far as the development areas, if we make sure that the driveway aprons are done, then at least then they'd be using, going back and forth through the driveway and not across our sidewalk. We could certainly, if there's a large development or a commercial property, there's usually a zoning bond associated with
Right.
that, and we could make sure that any damage that this would, if it happens to be right after our project, that we could incorporate that in a condition of approval, that, any damage to the sidewalk would be the responsibility of the contractor there.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Stone. Thank you, Mr. Hurley.
You just brought up something. I ride my bike around there all the time. The
Roads do you use?
I know. This is
Let me
not-
know if you have any idea.
Well, it's by Miller.
Okay.
The problem is, Tom just brought it up. If we're putting new sidewalks and we don't want cars on it,
No, typically you wouldn't.
because the cars are parking on the sidewalks now.
Well, right now, as I said, I think that has to do also with the fact that
Low
the curbs
curb,
are only 1
right.
inch. And so it's just natural. At a 6-inch or slightly higher, maybe we'd go 7-inch curb, we
Yeah.
can at least discourage that. I wouldn't say totally prevent it, but certainly discourage it. And if they do, the reinforced concrete would hold off because they don't...
Yeah, well, they're going over it because it's easy.
Do you have any other questions on this item? With this in mind, thank you, Mr. Hurley. We just heard the justification. We did hear that the Board of Selectmen approved this unanimously earlier today. We do have bond counsel here, so let's turn to the resolution and just see if anybody has any questions on the wording of the resolution. I will note, and Mrs. Leclerc brought this up, so thank you. The resolution is 20 years for this, and the useful lives of the assets of the sidewalks is well over that 20-year period, and that was something that this board put great focus on related to our bonding policies. So I point that out. Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In paragraph 1, maybe I'm looking at this a little too specifically. I don't see sidewalks. I see certain pedestrian, bicycle, streetscape, and median improvements. Am I to assume that pedestrian improvements is sidewalks? Just want to make sure.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the resolution? Board members? Anything from the public? Okay, do we have a motion on this? Do we have a second? Yeah, it's already made, it's already before us. Okay, I'm going to call this to a vote. The item, to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution approving a grant from the Department of Transportation for improvements in Commerce Drive, Kings Highway area, appropriating $1.2 million for the cost of such project and authorizing the issuance of $1.2 million in bonds to fund such appropriation, is now before us. All in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? The item passes. Mr. Hurley, thank you.
All right, thank
And
you.
good luck with your project.
Thank you, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, contact me.
Thank you very much. All right, item number 2, to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution authorizing appropriation of $12.5 million to refund certain of the town's outstanding bonds and authorizing the issuance of refunding bonds to finance such appropriation. Can we put the item before us, please? Mr. Polito, do I have a second? I'll go with Mr. Brockfeld this time. The item is now before us. Okay, questions, comments, concerns from board members on this item? Mr. Brockfeld.
I'll just throw a softball to Mr. Mayor. Is there anything special, or, I mean, we've done this, obviously. I think we all understand the concept of refinancing and, you know, more attractive rates in the marketplace. So is there anything here we should know that is different from how this has been presented to us in the past?
The short answer is no. The town anticipates refunding approximately $11.5 million of 2004 bonds, which under current market conditions, there'd be approximate debt service savings to the town of about $700,000 net, that's after expenses, over the remaining life of the bonds. Maturity date is 2020, which, as Mr. Flynn pointed out earlier, does not change. This represents about 6.5 net present value savings, and industry guidelines and GFO best practices recommending funding over 3% net present value is deemed economically viable.
Please.
You said these were 2004 bonds? Is that what you said?
That's when they were issued.
When they were issued. Are we doing it now because there was a no-call feature that only allowed us now to?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from board members on this item? Any questions, comments from the public? Oh, Mrs. Leclerc, my apologies.
I just want to confirm, there's no additional risks that we're taking on here? The same as...
This
the
is a
other
very
funding?
simple one, actually.
Okay.
It'll all go through escrow and be cleared in about a month and a half,
Okay,
assuming that interest rates hold and we actually execute.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask that you, if this does happen, that you alert us via email as soon as this transaction happens?
Keep you posted.
Thank you. Seeing nothing from the board, I'm going to go to the public. Nothing on this item. Okay, to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution authorizing the appropriation of $12.5 million to refund certain of the town's outstanding bonds and authorizing the issuance of refunding bonds to finance such appropriations. Now before us, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The item carries. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Cleary.
Easy night.
All right. Item number 3, to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to approve the transfers of department overdrafts as of June 30th, 2013, i.e. the last fiscal year. Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As everyone knows, this is an annual event. A little bit different this year, maybe, because you'll probably see a greater number of accounts, because in prior years, the town normally had a contingency fund that some of these items were taken against, but that contingency fund, we didn't have one in 13, or a very small one, so there'll be a greater number of accounts here. The only other comment I'd like to make is the FEMA reserve is not finalized, the total FEMA. So if there is a further adjustment to the FEMA reserve, there would be another further transfer requested based upon the final evaluation of that activity. With that, I guess I'll open the floor up to questions from anything on the schedule.
Questions for Mr. Mayor on these items? All right, I do have a few I want to follow up on myself if there's no others, and please, board members, feel free to chime in. Let's go to the police, the 398, the payroll. I know we've been running over in this all year. What was a lot of this related to, Mr. Mayor? Just, it's such a large number.
I think the bulk of that was actually the union contract catch-up.
And we had nothing set aside for that?
The contingency was, the town had a very small contingency.
Yeah, but the prior year, we had put aside more in contingency.
The prior year we had accrued through 12. This
Right.
is the fiscal 13
Right.
actual retro paid for the fiscal year that
So
the
this is
contract
just related to
settled
the year?
in February. Yes, this is for the year.
Got it. Okay, so it's not going back to prior years. And the savings on the other side, what were those savings? How were those, like the assessor's fees and professional services for $92,000? How did we save that?
Yeah, the assessors fees, there was some anticipation of a greater number of appraisals and consultants work that was going to be required on the tax appeal activity, which was managed so that was not necessary.
None of that was set aside for legal work that's covered up above? I'm just trying to connect the dots here.
Legal work is above.
Right, but what I'm saying is, was the 92 budgeted legal fees related to any of the assessment work, or no? Was this different than legal fees? And
This is
was
different
other
than
assessment?
legal fees.
Different. Okay. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the insurance, because I don't remember that item being up before.
The insurance savings aren't really savings. Both the first quarter liability insurance and property insurance payments were actually paid in the prior year. So there was only 3 quarters of payments made.
So it's a timing difference.
Yes, sir.
Why was the interest expense, I'm surprised the interest expense was under, yeah.
Yeah, the bond issuance in July of 13 had a budgeted expenditure amount of, Caitlin knows these numbers better than I do.
We issued bonds in July of actually 12 for the fiscal 13 year.
Right.
And when we issued those bonds, there was an interest payment due in January of $130,000.
Which had not been budgeted.
Okay, but again, on that, I'm just trying to connect the dots here.
Yep.
We just did something where we had 12.5 million in savings. We did or not in savings, that resulted in interest savings. Last year, as I recall, we did another such outcome, refunding that resulted in significant interest savings. Is that correct?
I don't know if the last refunding was in 12 or 13.
This interest expense, I believe,
This was 13.
relates
Was
to
it
a
in-
bonding, not a refi.
This was not a refunding
I
bond.
understand,
right.
but here's the issue. You were short in the interest, you're short in the interest expense account.
Yep.
This would say that basically, hey, we were short in the interest expense account by $105,000. All right?
Yeah.
Okay, as I recall, and I'm asking, memory could be faulty.
Yep.
Right? As I recall, there was interest savings last year due to some of the refinancing activities that we had done, and I thought we had actually picked up some interest expense. Do you recall this?
Well, I do, but my guess is that was budgeted.
I don't know. I remember one year it wasn't budgeted, and that's what I'm
I hear you.
conflicting the years. But I remember one year we had significant interest savings. So I was surprised to see that we were short in the interest expense account. Yeah, Mr. Tetra.
I think he's off.
If I might, Mr. Chair, just to help with the timing,
Yes, please. That's what I'm
there
asking.
was a refinance we did where we got authorization roughly about this time
Yep,
in the fall of 11,
and not in the fall of 12.
and it refinanced in January of 12, and we saved roughly $1 million of interest in that year.
Uh-huh,
So that was fiscal 12.
right.
All right. Now, I think that was the last time we did a refi, Caitlin, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yep.
So we've done bands in the interim, we've done
Yep.
bands, and we've done bonding in the interim. But I think that was the last refi.
But I also thought in our budget that we had budgeted for higher interest rates on some of our bonding activities than what we came out with.
I think to what Bob just said, are you thinking of the premium that we received on our bonds and our bands that flow
We
through our
did that
debt
as well,
service?
yes.
But so I'm not sure exactly I'm very comfortable with this 130.
Where did that premium flow through that interest
debt service
savings based on? Okay, in
fund.
interest expense?
The debt service fund, a separate fund, which is
Okay.
where the premium resides
Yep.
prior to us having to pay the interest in the next year. So we had a substantial premium of almost $3 million, or 2.9.
I do remember that.
We budgeted $300,000 coming to the general fund, so the 2.6 still resides in the debt service fund.
How come this is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, how come this is the first time I remember our board hearing about an overage in the interest expense account for the year? I don't ever remember that coming up. or
I
being
disagree.
brought to our attention. Okay, when was it brought to our attention?
I want to say we knew about this last July.
Okay, but when did we know about it? 'Cause
I would
don't
say
ever
the first
remember.
quarterly report after that. I'm not sure if it was the first or the second. But I could follow up and give you that. No, I know that this has been on the variance report for at least a couple of the quarterlies.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't recall, do you?
It's okay, I can send you the documents.
remember being there, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it was
Yeah.
number one on my list.
Can we follow up on that?
Yeah,
Because
I
this
know, I
one
can
did
send you that.
surprise me.
Yep.
Thank you. And FEMA expense, how's that going to work with the reimbursement? Is this what we expect? Mr. Mayor, can you walk us through that again?
Yeah, the FEMA process is
Thank you, Mr. Tetra, by the way.
fairly laborious, but the short answer is, year to date, the town has submitted $3.5 million of expenditures.
Yep.
Some of that is non-cash recoverables, non-cash expenditures, I mean, like the use of our equipment, the rental of
Right.
our equipment, that type of thing. Of that, we have, so 75% of that is 2.6 million, which is approximately what we have booked as a receivable.
Yep.
Okay. And earlier I mentioned that there may be additional transfers.
Yep.
There's two other things going on. One other thing is $535,000 of that 3.492 did not come back from FEMA when the project work order was returned. Okay? In talking to our consultants, they're saying, well, we will pick it up when they do the closeout. Okay, we did not get a rejection letter. We didn't get a letter saying these were not authorized expenditures or whatever the right term would be. They were not rejected. It was absent. There's been some communication between the town and FEMA, and basically the bottom line is they will be discussed again. So there's that, and then there's a few other, maybe another few $100,000 that hasn't been billed yet. This is kind of, what we have, what we did, we took to true up the department's accounting records, we credited back to each department their FEMA expenses. Then
Right.
created a one FEMA expense line item.
I do remember speaking of that, yes.
Yeah, and this 682 is the net FEMA expense line item.
That's the net, that's what I was trying to get to. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Any other questions on these items? Mr. Brown?
Not a big number, but the 401A contribution, that's an option in certain union contracts at this point? Do you happen to know which contracts that's an option in?
It's an option on more than one.
Yeah, Thea, I know, is definitely one. And I don't think that's an option any longer. I think it's mandatory on Thea, on PETA, which is the mid-managers. I think it's optional on fire, I want to say.
Yeah, it's
You might
mandatory
know.
for new employees.
Right.
Fire is the only one that's optional.
Thea and PETA, I believe, but go ahead, Mike.
It's included in 5 of the 7 town contracts at the moment. Every one except police and fire has that option.
But Thea is mandatory for new employees, is what we're saying? Or
Each of those 5, it's mandated for new employees.
Okay. So this is a total, what did we contribute for the year?
Do you know?
We just had to move this amount, right?
It was not budgeted in 13 due to the timing of the 13 budget. It's now budgeted in 14.
So we'll have a separate line item for now on for this?
Yes.
In the
It's in the budget for 14.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Okay, I'm going to ask that this item be placed before us for voting. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to approve transfers of departmental overdrafts. Can you put that before us? Second? Okay, the item is now before us. All in favor of approving these transfers? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Thank you. And can I, yep, Bob, I'm sorry, did you have something? Oh, can I ask one follow-up? Can you walk me through the debt schedule? I'd like to go through the debt schedule for 2013 and make sure I understand it, because I'm still not clear. I'm just missing something there, so.
For 13.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Item number 4, to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to approve Schedules A, B, C, D, E, F, carrying over funds for encumbrances and reappropriations as of June 30th, 2013, as supported by purchase orders or letters of request by department heads or the Chief Fiscal Officer. Can I have a motion to put this before us? Mrs. Albin, second by Mr. Brockfeld. The item is now before us. We'll turn it back over to Mr. Mayor.
I will turn it over to our controller, Ms. Caitlin.
Okay, these schedules have been before you every year. They are, Schedule A is supported by purchase orders, already approved, but the goods or services had not been received as of 6/30/13. Just to give you a flavor, Schedule A last year in fiscal 12 was $256,000, so it's been decreased to about 108. At the bottom of A is the water pollution control, same theory as the town. Last year was 46, this year is 14. So they've been decreased a bit from the prior year. The next Schedule B is encumbrances for now that are 2 years old. And you're going to see letters from, you can see there's 3 departments requesting this. The Conservation for $39,500. Information Technology has one for 6, which are ongoing projects for the QSend server hosting. And the Public Works Operations is actually the Facilities Commission. They have a PO out there. I don't know if you guys remember. I think it was about $35,000 a couple years ago, and there's still an open PO that I didn't want to close out for about $3,700. Water pollution control has none from 12 and prior. Schedule C represents, in theory, the same thing. It's called a reappropriation. However, there's no PO per se. It's a request to carry over the funds for the next year. Again, you'll see the 2 letters, one from Conservation and one from Community and Economic Development, describing what the funds should be used for. And again, they're ongoing projects that span over multiple fiscal years. Schedule D, again, is 0. Schedule E is the Board of Ed encumbrances from fiscal year 13 for $1.2 million. Just to give you a sense, the number from fiscal 12 was $1,762,000, so it's gone down a bit, and Schedule F is 0. And you do have in your packets the listing of the POs associated with the encumbrances and the letters for the reappropriations, describing what they're to be used for.
Thank you, Ms. Bossi. I'll open it for questions to board members. Anybody have anything on these items? It was, I appreciate having the purchase order detail here. In some years past, we did not have that available, so thank you for that. That was helpful. Anybody else? One thing to note, and I just pointed out because it's one of those, I don't want to call it an urban myth, but it's one of those comments that you get every once in a while, particularly as it relates to the Board of Education. You hear oftentimes people say that, hey, they don't spend all their money during the year, and they load up on it at year end so that they don't lose it. And in fact, 1.2 million on a budget of their size is not that large an amount to say that's what's going on. And relative to the town side, it's pretty reasonable. I also want to commend everyone, because I know in prior years, we had those prior years' open appropriations. It was a much more extensive list. So the fact that, as we sit here now, it's so small is an improvement from what we've had in certain prior years, at least dating since when I was on the board and maybe some others. So thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll go to the public on these items. Anything? Okay. So the item is before us. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer and the Controller to approve Schedules A, B, C, D, E, and F, carrying over funds for encumbrances and reappropriations as of June 30th, 2013, as supported by purchase orders or letters of request by department heads or the Chief Fiscal Officer. All in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? We'll note that Mr. Brockfeld was out of the room on that item. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 5. Holdover item, to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $100,000 from the IT Department contingency account to the IT fees and professional services account. May I have a motion on this item? Mrs. Alban, do I have a second? We'll go with Mr. Stone. The item is now before us, and I know we have a cast of thousands here, so I'll turn it over to the administration.
I'd like to ask the celebrity panel, IT directors, Leslie and Burns, to come up to the front table here. I'd like to start off with a bit of an apology and a request, an indulgence request. The Board of Finance moved $100,000 to contingency of the IT department in April. It was approved by the RTM in May. We did not come before you until September. Had we come earlier, maybe some of the conversations which got a little bit contentious may not have been held. So I fully understand that. The indulgence is I'm going to have, as a result of last week's conversations during the quarterly review, we determined to make a couple other schedules which were not completed in time for the for the Friday distribution date. So I do have a couple of handouts. So with that, okay, we are here to discuss the information technology budget and future IT planning. The town IT budget for fiscal year 14 is $1,619,000. Of that, $1,585,000, or 98%, is for maintaining and supporting current operations, software, security, and hardware. That's 98% for current operations.
Sorry, is it 90% or 98?
98. Thank you. Second point is, I want to start with, and then we'll go into each of these in more detail, is the Munis Cloud. The town pays an annual contracted licensing fee for Munis to Tyler Technologies. The license had to be renewed. The then current licensing agreement expired August 13th, so we had to either pay the fee for continued self-hosting or move to the hosted solution, the software as a service, the SaaS cloud product. We had budgeted to move to the SaaS product for several reasons. Save the town hard costs of $182,000 over 5 years. Save the town soft costs, that is a reduction of staff time to support the self-hosting option, for approximately $35,000 to $45,000 per year, for a total of soft costs of about $200,000 over a 5-year period. And thirdly, we budgeted for it because it significantly strengthens the town's disaster recovery position. The third point item, the town administration has revised planned expenses to adjust to the approved budget with the $100,000 contingency. We are hopeful the $100,000 will be restored. However, we are currently operating as though the funding will not be restored. We will share with you tonight the choices we are considering and explain the reasoning for those choices. The final point, and one of the things that I'm sorry Mr. DeWitt is not here this evening, he's been one who's been requesting, strongly requesting that the IT department to present its plan for the future, and at the close of this presentation, Mr. Leslie will do that. All right, so speaking to these 4 points, the first point, very simple, the current budget is for current operations. There's not a lot of money in there for planning. And I think it's important in voting and considering this issue to separate the budget requirements to fund current operation and security requirements from future plans or budget for future plans. In September, Mr. Leslie did hand out a document which showed the current activity. It was a schedule of current operational activity by current activities and new initiatives. I have copies of that schedule if anybody wants one.
I would.
That's not one of the 2 that I said are extra.
Thank you, sir.
This schedule, if you remember, is not a line item budget schedule. The purpose of it was to, and is to, show the expenditures by function, by operational functionality, how much is spent on communications, how much is spent on software, how much is spent on equipment. So each of these line items would be a subset of an aggregation of individual budgeted line items. For example, communications is the direct communication budget is about $370,000, I believe. Then there's another few thousands of dollars for special department supplies, switches, and things like that. And then there's also net synergy, which would normally be under, which would come out of the professional fees and services budget. Software is primarily fees and services, the fees and professional services budget, less the amount that's network synergy and a portion of web equipment, or excuse me, web maintenance and web work development. And the equipment is a combination of capital, maintenance and repair, and special department supplies. And other is includes Fair TV, printing, postage, education and training, rent and storage, and disaster recovery. So those are the components, the line item components that make up the operational categories. But the goal was, this was the best way, I think, to present, to show what's current operations and what's new operations. This is, and it includes, as you can see, line 8, the 100,000 contingency line item. Okay, moving to the cloud decision. In your package, what we did get out Friday is a 5-year savings schedule. It shows the town will save $364,000 over the 5 years. The savings will continue beyond the 5 years, but, we had to cut off somewhere. Guess we could have done a net present value calculation, but we did not. One point of interest that may have been lost in this discussion is that the SAS option was budgeted by both the town and the Board of Education, and not moving to SAS would be detrimental to both budgets and both operations. So I would like Ms. Burns and Mr. Leslie, well, are there any questions on the 5-year schedule? You've had that for a while. And if not, I would like...
I have a question on the Munis schedule. I have 2 questions on that item. First one, I'm sorry, does anybody else have a question? I didn't mean to jump in. Does anybody else have a question before me? Okay. So one of the costs here is an allocated cost of a person, correct? So this is...
Looking at the 5-year schedule?
Yeah, I'm looking at the 5-year Munis.
Yes, sir.
So one of the costs is an allocated cost of a person. So my assumption is that the goal, or you're not proposing that we're going to eliminate that person, and that's going to be an actual savings.
Well, no, that is a correct statement. That's about a quarter of a person per each operation. So
Quarter of a
that
person
is
per
my
each operation.
that's the soft cost portion. The hard
Right.
cost portion is $182,000 savings. The
Right.
soft cost is $184,000 per this schedule. And that was done conservatively. That number could be calculated to be a lot higher, but I wanted to be conservative.
Okay, but if I look at it, and I'm not, again, I'm just analyzing the schedule. I know there's a lot of good reasons to go to the software as a service for security and for dependability and things like that. But if I look at it, you're saying that each year, or in the first year, let's just take for an example, we have $65,000 worth of savings, rough number, 64,329, right? Mm-hmm. Of that, 37,000 is related to personnel, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that 37, now, you said 2 things that were interesting to me there. Number one, okay, that's not a real quote-unquote savings, and that we're not losing that person, or that quarter
That's why I
of a
call it
person.
soft cost, yes, sir.
Right.
And it's savings of services which will be diverted to other
Cost benefit.
services and other benefits to the town.
So the first thing you said there, which was surprising to me, was that's a quarter of that person's cost, so we're actually paying all
No,
in
it's
about
two persons.
2 persons.
2 persons.
Okay, so it's
Quarter
$80,000,
each.
not...
Quarter
not-
Board of Ed, quarter town.
Okay. And there's other ways that these people will be utilized?
Yes, there's not a lot of slack time in the IT in either department.
Yeah. Okay. The other item on here is $14,000 for electrical costs.
Yes, sir.
That's a lot of electrical.
That's a lot of equipment. We have 2 different server centers, one here and one at Burr, with switches, and I worked with our maintenance department to calculate out what the electrical costs were associated with the actual hardware in place, and that's the number that we came up with.
So that will actually be unplugging those servers, not incurring those electrical
Assuming we
costs.
don't repurpose them, and assuming we don't replace them with newer equipment, hopefully that will be more efficient.
What would we replace, but not
Well, there's,
newer?
you
Well,
know,
no, wait, let me interrupt there. The direct answer to your question is yes. We will save money. If we need other servers, or if we need to,
How many
because of
servers
capacity.
is that for $14,000 a year?
God, what,
It's
12?
roughly 5 servers at each site, plus storage network, plus switches, plus the air conditioning that runs those, that cools the Burr site, which had to be installed to support the DR.
So there's no, will that Burr site not be used for any other DR?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's legitimate that we're going to actually save this $14,000 by all that equipment that you're unplugging. Now, to your point, Bob, if there's a management decision to use it in some other way, that's separate. But
Correct.
the calculated amount is $14,000 in actually energy
That's-
cost savings.
That is correct.
And that's 10 servers, the switches, the air conditioning unit, and the disaster recovery area in Burr that's not being used for anything else but the Munis backup.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this? Mr. Brown?
Thank you. The $366,000 savings, Just to clarify, that's a joint savings between the Board of Ed and the town.
That's correct.
Do you have any idea how that would split?
Um,
Well, pretty much half-half. They attempt to pay for it. They alternate paying half-half in the budget.
It's roughly half-half. I would say there's a little bit of an edge at the Board of Ed, simply for the fact that because we host the servers, we've had more of the labor and the expenses that are sort of nebulous. One good example is the backup costs. That's all out of my backup because it's like, it's difficult to divvy up those servers separate from everything else that we back up, and that's at $8,100. And that would be a soft cost as well, as much as I don't expect, as much as we will not have to back up Munis, I've had to add to storage because the Board of Ed's amount of electronic records that we're holding on to is roughly growing by 2 terabytes a year. I won't have to buy the additional storage, so I'll save it that way, but it won't be realized savings, and that you'll see a number go down. A number won't increase.
But it would go down if it wasn't for the activity, so it is a hard cost.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Any other questions on the 5-year schedule related to Munis?
Okay, now, one of the issues was, okay, why did we do it now? So I'd now like Ms. Burns and Mr. Leslie to discuss the value of the move. We've talked about the value, the reason, but we haven't, and the benefit to disaster recovery plan, so maybe we don't need to go over that. Leave that to the option of the board. But I would like Ms. Burns specifically to address why it became important to do it when we did it.
We, I pushed to get the conversion underway because we were eliminating a position. I lost a programmer who was on staff specifically to support our student management system that we replaced, and one of his talents was also writing SQL reports. So as we decommissioned our old student management system and got beyond our conversion, his responsibilities were keeping what had been formerly maintained as I'll call it a report writing function that interfaced with the Munis system. Because he was leaving our organization knowing his job was going away, I needed to make sure that the reports that we currently have in place that are outside of Munis but connect to Munis could be rewritten to still address the new server structure. So in other words, they needed to call to what the new server names were, for a lack of a better description. In addition to that, my key engineer, who is I'll say the key support person for both the town and the Board of Ed, had a personal injury and needed some surgery. So what I was trying to do is get all of this stuff done, A, at a time that was conducive to my department's needs, and B, at a time that wasn't going to be burdensome to both Caitlin's organization and Doreen Munsell's. As you can imagine, the finance departments have very small windows of opportunity to move from one database to another and do the appropriate testing that's necessary. So we sort of push the envelope to get it done.
Thank you. Questions, comments on the Munis item? Okay, so let's turn our attention, if we could, back to this item. All right, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
All right. So I just quickly tied and made sure that fiscal year 13 ties to the budget book, and fiscal year 14 ties to the budget book. Fiscal year 14 includes the $100,000 of IT contingency, and it includes $34,000 of the 2 new projects. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the next part of this conversation is going to be about the $100,000 on the IT contingency, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because the rest of it has already been approved,
Right.
it's part of the budget. The Munis numbers are included in the rest of it, not in the $100,000?
Yeah, what I'm going to hand out now
Okay.
is a schedule which shows the expenditure changes the town is contemplating to conform to the approved budget. We saved what we could in fees and professional services without placing system security and current operations at risk. Current operations, i.e. building department, tax collection department, finance, etc., and are planning to save the rest out of capital outlay. Since we cannot be certain about what equipment might fail during the year, We're also, at this time, doing our best to save on the special department supplies budgeted line item. Thank you. Get Mike and Roger as well. Just leave me one, thank you.
Thank you.
Lou Holtz once told me that when you have handouts, hand out one at a time, because otherwise people will be looking at the one you're not talking about.
Okay, so we're looking at the one that you handed out.
So, very simple, Lee. Here's, it's two simple schedules. The planned expenditures, you have approved budget, 283,500 in fees and professional services, $109,000 in capital, $100,000 contingency line item. The planned expenditures at this point, $357,000 in fees and professional services, $35,000 in capital. We don't plan on spending the contingency unless, of course, this body reinstates it. And then the second half of the schedule shows year-to-date expenditures made. Of the 283, we have spent 154,000, and of the capital, we have spent zero.
Okay. Questions on this schedule? Anyone?
I can't ask any questions because I have a new handout. Lou Holtz just said it's confusing for me to.
Thank you.
I guess, can I have one, Tom?
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just, so I know you just touched on this, so I'm just trying to tie up, there's a lot of numbers here to reconcile. So we approved 109,000 in capital, right? We've spent 35, and you're saying that we'll economize in the capital area in order to make things balance out. I guess I could ask you guys too. So what are we not?
Yes, that is the planned expenditures, yes, sir.
So what are we doing, what are we not doing on capital? Where are we economizing or skimping?
I will now share a schedule which shows the listing. Oh, you have it already?
Yes. Thank you.
Of what we believe is the required fees and capital, fees and professional services expenditures and the capital outlay. And this schedule, first column is the account number. You obviously don't need that. Second column, the second column is the description. Excuse me, it says item. It's the item, it's the product that the specific product supports. Then you have the description, and then we have the planned expenditure. And these are all pretty much virus software, maintenance, hardware, software maintenance, software licensing. They are, that support our current operations. This supports the assessor, the building permits, the solid waste scale software, the tax collector software, the fire department maintenance software, WPCF software to manage their equipment. So I don't know if you have any questions on the purpose of any of these, then you would address those to the table, not to me. The capital outlay is at the bottom. It shows what we would spend. The 35,000. One point of interest, and this kind of goes back to something Ms. Burns said earlier. We need the last line item in the schedule is the need to add a server for $10,000. The only reason we're only adding one server is because we are going to use some of the servers from that we're freeing up by going to the cloud. Otherwise, we would have to buy at least one more server.
So let me ask you a
So
question.
there's another $10,000 actually in savings that actually was not on that schedule that we discussed earlier.
So just to level set it, by bringing Munis to the cloud, by going to software as a service, we're freeing up 10 servers, is that correct?
That's correct.
But you've already have plans to repurpose those 10 servers.
Mr.
No,
Leslie does.
the 10 servers are old.
Getting 10?
Well, they are being repurposed, though, right?
Right, recycled.
Repurposed, recycled,
Repurposed.
whatever. They're going to be used.
Yes.
And in fact, you can actually use 11, which is why you have to go buy an extra one for $10,000.
The difference is between the sizing. The servers that were bought are old, and so if you want me to get technical, you know the Intel.
No, I just
talking-
want to ask, you have 10 servers, you need 11. That was the question.
Yes.
Mr. Brockfield? Thanks.
I just want to circle back, if I can.
Okay, this is separate.
Well, it's sort of,
Okay.
this is all a piece, but.
Okay.
But Mr. Mayor, so it didn't really answer my question.
What question?
The question was, I'm curious, is we budgeted 109,000 for capital, and we have, I see where you're spending your 35. What are we,
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
What do
for
we
example, if you look at the first line under capital outlay, you know, the town has an annual replacement program where we replace 60 PCs a year to keep people current as opposed to old software, old programs. I can let,
Old hardware. I'm not going to buy as many.
so we're just kind of.
obviously, you can't buy
just
60
not-
PCs for $10,000.
Right.
Right.
So we're
So
gonna-
we're
so
just
not
not
going to
buying.
replace X
Correct.
number of PCs.
Right. So more people will work with older equipment.
So, and I'm trying to simplify this as much as I can so I can understand it myself and maybe the rest. So you're saying that if we don't approve the $100,000 transfer,
Right.
basically you're going to save the money by not buying replacement
stuff.
PCs?
Right.
Is that a simple way of putting it?
Right. New PCs, some printers, and the other thing, the laptops.
And what would be the,
What's the
what's
impact
the,
of that?
real impact? Yeah, the real impact. I mean, how old are these
Ba-
people? Like, how often
basically,
do we
you're-
turn them
you're-
over?
My biggest impact right now is, if anyone doesn't know, Windows XP is about to go DOA, which means they're not going to do any more upgrades to Windows XP. And I've got about 134 Windows XP machines left. And if you go with my renewal thing, that's still going to take me 2 years, because every year I've had that budget part cut to a certain degree. So I've been pushed out, and it's getting pushed out more.
How many, Tom, can I follow up? Please. How many PCs, I'm just curious, I mean, how many PCs do we have in town?
About 500.
About 500. So if you replace 60 per year, my math is, so you're saying it's like a 9-year cycle? 8 or 9 years?
That's what's happened.
I understand. So that's pushing a PC, at least from our own personal experiences, pretty hard. What does it mean when
It's
Windows
been a very
X-
tight IT budget for a few years.
What does it mean when XP, I mean, I've read this myself, just casual, XP not being supported going at some point here. What does that really mean? I mean, that doesn't mean XP
You know, all
stops
those-
working, right?
The biggest thing that you can really clearly understand is that they're not going to write anything more to the XP operating system.
Well, the biggest issue is Internet Explorer won't be supported in its more advanced numbers. So in other words, it'll support up to IE 8, but
Okay.
all the new stuff that's being written is IE 9 and above, which means that people won't be able to use those web
You mean-
browsers
when
to
you
get
mean-
to the Internet.
When you mean new stuff being written, you mean like ESPN?
Websites, yeah, websites, applications that are web-based, like Munis, for example, all those updates will not run properly on an XP machine because their web browser won't support them.
Then the other thing is the security updates. They're not going to write any more security updates.
Okay.
So that's viruses and spam and stuff like that.
Okay, so
the longer you sit on XP, the better your chances of are getting.
Okay, so I'm basically on your team here, so I'm just trying to understand, so what is what does it really mean? So you have 60, you have 50, I mean, if you're only going to spend $10,000, I mean, my guess is you can buy, maybe if you're lucky, maybe 15 PCs for.
About that amount,
Right.
yes.
So you normally do 60, so there's 45 not being done. So I guess a couple of questions for you. So who would be the 45 people who are using what sound like pretty, I mean, Mr. Mayor, for example, would be using an antiquated PC, or who would be working an XP machine that you're saying becomes very difficult to get your work done on?
We try to do it by department of, walking into the department and cleaning out a whole thing, but it just doesn't work out that way. So what happens is we sit there and as they break, we replace them, or we try to do by department, or we also sit there and if something comes along and someone needs a better machine because they're just doing the kind of work that needs some hardware behind it, then we replace them. So it's we're working through it, but we work through it in sort of 3 different protocols.
Sort of moving from a proactive approach to an on-demand approach.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, it sounds, let me ask Mr. Mayor, because I didn't understand I know where you're going from. Who will be impacted by this? Like, where will the town suffer? Where will the town's taxpayers and customers suffer because we don't keep our equipment up to date? I mean, 8 or 9 years strikes me as a very long replacement cycle. I'm surprised. I would have guessed more like 4 or 5, just based on.
That's what I tried to go to 4, and then I got pushed to 5, and then I got pushed.
Right. So where would the?
Well, I mean, the impact, I guess, is to some extent, it's all because, the equipment is slower, the equipment has more bugs in it. There's, it's just, as Mr. Leslie just said, it's instead of having a real replacement formula in place, what we do, as Ms. Burns just said, is we have a reactive, what breaks, what goes wrong. So, I think that's an excellent way to describe it. It's reactive rather than
I'm
rather
trying to
than
build my
proactive.
own case for wanting to vote for this, so I'm still not getting the answer.
Well, I don't know who's not going to get their
Basically, it's
damn
gonna,
piece of.
some people are going to be running slow, so if a customer's there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say, who's going to come to town hall to ask for some service, and they're going to say, oh, you have to wait 20 minutes because I can't,
It really depends on which department you're looking at and which ones we've done and haven't done. And
Mr. Brockfeld, I can give you a specific example from just last night.
Okay.
I was fortunate, I guess you'd say, enough to serve as the head moderator for the election last night, and in putting the election returns in the computer, I was using a Google-based spreadsheet that would basically, as the tallies came in, I would put them in. I literally had to shut down and restart Internet Explorer a dozen times because the spreadsheet would just freeze. It would just go away. It would be loading, and it wouldn't work at all. I got so frustrated I actually downloaded Google Chrome onto the computer just for last night so I could just get the darn thing to work. That's just one example of how a slow machine can
So
kill
you were using a town's computer to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
I was using from the Registrar of Voters, and it was impossible. What should have taken, maybe about half or 3/4 of the time ended up taking me till 12:45 this morning, in large part because that computer was so slow and difficult to operate, just to get it to do basic things like scroll up and down. As people were giving me election returns, I'm trying to type them in, and there was literally like a 5-second delay between when I typed and when the number actually appeared on the spreadsheet. So I can tell you from personal experience, just from last night, if I'm going through that, I can't even imagine what some of the people working there every day are going through.
I hope you weren't being paid hourly for that job.
I don't know, Roger? Yeah, overtime.
Can I follow up? And I might be going the same place you are. Thank you, Mr. Polito, for the insights. What's the average cost you're paying per PC?
About $575.
Okay. What's the average age of the current PCs on the town side right now?
I can't give you that number. I can sit there and say I've done 2/3 of the replacements to Windows 7.
Since, let me put it another way. How many PCs did you buy for the town last year?
100.
100.
I think 100, yes.
How many did you buy the year before that?
125.
So roughly, 50% of the PCs are, 45 to 50% of 500 PCs are 2 years old and under. Under 2 years old,
Yes.
right? Okay, that doesn't square with the comment earlier of a 9-year useful life, and it doesn't square with the comment about the budget being cut on the replacement. But be that as that may, let's hold that there for a second. 500. I'm trying to get my arms around that figure
Right.
from the standpoint of, there's roughly 500 employees on the town side?
Full-time, yes, but there's a bunch of part-timers who use computers
Okay,
as
so how
well.
many part-timers? Rough number, Caitlin, you don't need to, I'm not going to,
Yeah,
Several hundred.
I think you're up to 800 almost.
several hundred. What areas?
I mean, you can't include, it's a hard number just because you have referees and you have a whole bunch of summer counselors who clearly don't have PCs.
Yeah, well, here's the thing I'm thinking of. Clearly, every fireman doesn't have a PC, right?
No, but we have multiple PCs, like we have PCs in the trucks, we have PCs.
I get it. But every fireman doesn't have a PC. Does every police officer have a PC?
No.
No. And most of their PCs are actually bought from their budget because we have rugged laptop things,
No.
right, that go in the
No,
cars.
it's in my budget.
Since when? I remember approving the rugged laptops in their budget. We had a big presentation about it like 3 years ago.
That's about when it got switched over to me.
That was nifty. Okay, so how many PCs we have there?
The number, I've got about 500 PCs out in the field.
That's a number I can't get. That's the number I can't
And
get my
that-
arms around.
To me, that is how many people in the town use a computer. But you can't do it that way because, we have like a computer sitting on the counter in the building department so that they can sit there and show it to a person. So it's not allocated to an individual, it's allocated to the department. So I got a fair amount of number of those that are out there.
Are they all asset tagged? I mean, do we have an inventory listing and then you have, they're not asset tagged?
No.
Okay.
A lot of them do not meet our fixed asset threshold.
So the 500s must be a round number, right?
I think he's basing it on Active Directory because he's, one of those computers is an object in Active Directory, so he kind of knows from his Active Directory how many units he actually has control over because each one of them has a unique name in order to be addressed by the network. So I would assume that's where, he's getting the guesstimate.
That's where my number's coming from. It's machines that are out there live and working.
Okay.
And it's 234 for Windows 7 machines, and it's 234 from 500 is...
Yeah, I don't need, I'm not,
It's about two-thirds of 500 that are new, and they're about a third that are Windows XP.
right. I'm not trying, and believe me, I'm not trying to micromanage it. I'm trying to get my arms around
can
the
appreciate
conversation
that,
here. Because when you threw the 500 number at me, that surprised me. So you've got about 250 laptops, let's say 275, that are 2 years and older, right?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. So that means you've got to replace them over the next 3 years.
I should be replacing them within the year, but I can't.
Okay, but you can't tell me that because you just replaced over 200 in the last 2 years, so half your inventory
Right,
is
but
under
this
2
year,
years.
if I don't get the $100,000, I'm going to be replacing 15 of them.
I'm not talking about that. Let's
Okay,
put that
all
to
right.
the side for a second. I'm trying to calculate the number this year.
Right.
Right? So if we were to say, do another 100 this year, right? If you have 500, that puts you on a 5-year replacement cycle, right?
Right.
Let's say an average cost of 600,
Fair.
right? It's easy math, right? $60,000, right? Who gets laptops?
People who need them.
Wow, that
By
was a wise
department
answer.
director request. I mean, like the building department, we wanted to sit there and get the building department on laptops so they can actually enter from the field. We've got a couple of glitches in it, but we got them the laptops and we're working on the glitches.
So do we have a policy over who gets laptops, or if people request them, we just give them to them?
It's by department directors, okay, saying, I listen to them and I say, hey, it makes sense to me, and the department director agrees, and I get them one.
So how many laptops does $5,000 get you?
The newer laptops are about, just bought a bunch of them. I really don't remember. It's not going to get me a lot.
I'm paying about $650 a machine right now for a laptop.
650 machine? Okay, so in the 500 number that you talked about earlier,
Yeah.
is that 500 include laptops and PCs, or just PCs?
PCs.
Just PCs. So we have 500 PCs.
No, I'll take that back. It doesn't, yes, because she's right. It comes off my network list.
Okay, good point. So that's 500, including laptops. How many laptops? Any idea?
I think it was like
counting or not counting the police department rugged stuff?
Are the police department rugged stuffs in these numbers? Thank you, Nancy.
They used to be, but we have a freeze on it until we have the IT steering committee to decide, so we'll probably see them in this next coming budget year.
Got it. So let's exclude those. So, thank you. So how many laptops excluding those, you think?
60 maybe?
60. So if we do 440, right? Okay, let's still stay with 100, and you have 60 laptops, right? It's $700 a piece, right?
Okay.
That allows you to get, $5,000 allows you to get 7 laptops, right?
That makes sense?
Okay, so you need 12, right? To keep on a 5-year replacement? So you need 8,400. You got 5,000, you need 3,400 more, right?
Yep.
So to get 100, you have 600, you get 60,000. So I'm calculating, in order to do your replacement program and get you better towards what you are, you need about $56,800.
Okay.
Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right.
Actually, my apologies. Need about $53,400.
That's what I got, but I wasn't going to question your math.
Feel free, question me all the time. So $53,400. That's really what you need, right?
For those two things, for the PCs and the laptops, yes.
Okay, and that puts you on a 5-year replacement cycle,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Can we get, I understand for accounting purposes, we don't need to capitalize these things. I get it. But for security purpose, we definitely need to tag these things.
We know when they go because they disconnect them from the network.
Okay, so how many PCs do we have?
Tagging systems before, and it's an absolute mess.
Yeah, I've done tagging of PCs too, and because it's a mess doesn't mean you can't do it. I mean, I just don't want somebody walking off with a laptop that we bought for $600.
Right.
Or rather a PC, or a laptop for $700.
Right. No, I can appreciate that.
You know, for me, it's not the accounting side of it, it's the security side of it.
I'm still telling you it's going to be a mess. Because what happens is we cannibalize PCs to sit there and make them last longer, and so you sit there and take the cover off one. Depending on where you put the asset tag, you take the cover off the thing. And
I don't think we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what else? I mean, anybody else have any questions? I just wanted to go through that myself,
I have a
please.
budgeting question.
Sure.
I should know the answer to this, so, but I'll ask Caitlin. When a department head requests a computer, goes to Don and says, based on what you're describing to me, he says, we need a computer, right?
For some function or other.
Right.
Additional or whatever,
Right.
because they've already got
I understand.
staff.
So Department X asks for a computer, you say, it sounds like, you know, he says, I really need this, you say, okay, and you buy it from him, you get it, right? Where does that 700, does that money, does that expense, is that a budget line item in the IT department or in the department? of
IT
that-
department,
Why do we do it that way, other than I can see the obvious
centralized
convenience?
IT.
I can see the convenience side of it, but there's no question that a department head who can ask for a new PC and have it reside in somebody else's budget is going to be a lot more liberal in his request for an item than if
Absolutely.
than if it's in his budget. I've had that exact experience in my own private career, where we made some changes and all of a sudden expenses went down radically. I'm just asking.
I've seen 0 department budgets for IT, and
Right.
I don't get any money. Everything gets billed out back to the departments
Right.
like you're talking about. And the problem there then is IT doesn't have any control over the situation because it's their money and they can do what they want with it. It's sort of like the police buying the rugged laptops. So
That hasn't been my experience. My experience is much like Mr. Brockfeld's. The budget is within your control. It's accumulated in a centralized.
right, well, that's what I was
department.
getting to, is if you give it all to them and you don't give me any control,
Well, here's the issue.
you do
Here's the issue, you need
those
to
back
allocate
things.
it back to the departments.
Right,
In order to
exactly.
do what you're talking about, you need to allocate it back
Right.
to the departments and then say, you spend $10,000 on rugged laptops, oh well.
Right,
You know,
Right.
that was
Yeah.
your priority for this year.
yeah.
Yeah,
We could bring it up, I don't want to, I mean,
Yeah,
we-
our process at the Board of Ed, and we're actually going through it now for the 14-15 budget, is every department, every curricular area is required to put forward a portion of their budget as a technology request. And they put forward everything that they think they need, and then we vet that at several different levels before it even hits the superintendent's request, including he vets it as well. So we make decisions along the way about what we're going to do and what we're not going to do, and then come the fiscal year, we allocate based on what those requests were.
Exactly.
Now, there's always a contingency fund for the unexpected. You know, an application requires a more powerful machine that you didn't anticipate because of some update that happened. A new employee is brought on board that may be more computer proficient than their predecessor, or roles change. So there's always some flexibility in the department budget to accommodate those needs. But that's, at least from the board side, that's the approach we take.
Can I make a request?
Please.
Through you to Mr. Mayor and Mr. Tetro, that if they come back to us, and if they choose to think about what I brought up about, I'm not arguing in any way, shape, or form that there shouldn't be an IT department or an IT director, and that Don Leslie shouldn't be responsible for implementing and buying and all that kind of stuff. But it seems to me that it at least would make sense to have it allocated back to the departments into their budgets, so that it's something that they feel, as opposed to, just give me 2 PCs. I'm not saying anybody wastes intentionally, but
Yeah, if you're not held accountable for it, why not ask for it?
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
just be curious,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brockfield. Can we talk about that offline? Mr. Polino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the reasons that it made sense to me to have a centralized IT department is that we would have a better handle on the equipment that we have out there. And what I'm a little troubled by, and maybe it's just me, is that we don't have an inventory of exactly what we have out there. We're just kind of guessing ballpark numbers about we have X number of PCs, they're at this department, that department. Is anybody else bothered by that? I mean, it would seem to me there should be some specificity in terms of we have 523 computers, we have 20 of those that are with the building department, we have, 50 of them that are with the fire department. That doesn't seem to exist, and I don't understand why.
I just wasn't prepared to do that here at this meeting.
So you do have such a list?
Yeah, it's dynamic, it's live, I can give it to you anytime you need it.
I think we need it. Maybe not me since my last meeting, but for you guys.
We'll forward it
We'll
to you.
forward
You're
it
a
to you.
taxpayer.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you. Other questions on this item? Do you want to continue down this list? Mr. Brown, did you
yeah,
have something?
I'm sorry.
The savings for year one, is that this year?
Yes.
Okay, so year one is, so we'll save $64,000 in this budget. Okay, thank you.
Let's correct that. However, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Romero, but based on my understanding, that savings is already factored into the 2014 budget year. Okay, so it's not a savings from budget, it was contemplated as the budget.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I have to do this. It's against my better judgment almost. I understand where you're going with the questions, with the $54,000 or $53,004. At least I think I do. So, Mr. Leslie, and I don't have, I'm trying to remember your detailed budget request line items. And I remember going through it, and of the $109,000, or $169,000, the original number was $136,000 budget after the first selectman cuts. There was the replacement program, which Mr. Chairman Flynn has just carried us through. There were some other Oh, thank you, Ms. Caitlin. There was a laptop replacement, which we've discussed. Then there was printer replacement of $21,000. That's the one I was forgetting.
Right.
Yeah, so now it's at 10,000.
Right. And we're hoping that the printers don't break
Okay?
too much.
Okay, thank you.
The, is that it?
Yeah.
Can we go to this schedule then? This is the listing of IT department initiatives. Mr. Mayor, I don't want to jump in here, but can I?
This is it, we're there.
All right.
You guys are managing the presentation well.
Thank you. The, here's, and I wonder if other board members have the same question. You walked us down this list, and thank you. It's pretty, the explanations were pretty good and self-explanatory. Okay, thank you. Question I have is, are all these items contemplated by this list?
No.
Okay. So what items in these initiatives are not included in the expense side of this list?
The phone system replacement, because that would be a capital improvement.
Yep,
The LAN upgrades, which would be needed for the phone system replacement, which would be another capital improvement.
yep,
And the WAN replacement in 2016.
got it. So Munis is included, we talked about that,
Right?
right? It's actually a net savings, right? And the web PD and FD consolidation, which I saw here, is basically merging that into the town's website, correct?
Right.
So that's included here.
No, it's not. It's been removed because if we don't get the $100,000.
Okay, so let me see it here. Okay, there's a town and fire website fee. It's a fire department management software. Scheduling staff and PD and FD.
Down to what the,
You see the 1-0 line in the...
Here it is.
Number
Ah,
four?
it's zero. Thank you, that's what I didn't see. So how much is that?
10,000.
$10,000. And that's to merge that in. What's that $10,000 for?
The work of the QSend company to take the website, analyze it, digest it, and stick it into their content management system.
What content management system are they using?
The QSend content management system. That's, the whole QSend started off because of the agenda and minutes for meetings.
Yeah.
And it's a content management system, and so we can do a lot more with it, and that's what we've been wanting to do. So one of the things was to move the whole town system in there, which we're about to do in probably February approximately. Don't hold me to that. And then,
Will that be a website redesign? Because we were talking last week about how difficult it is to find some of the backup
Yes.
documentation.
yes.
for
So
our
if you
meetings.
look at the Park and Recs, Park and Rec already got converted,
Yeah,
and the agenda and minutes is on the new system. And then we'll take the rest of the town, and they're going through all the departments, checking all the content, making sure everything's done right and that it looks good and stuff, and they're moving that over. And then the last stage of it was to take the police and the fire and move it over.
why wasn't that originally in the budget? You didn't know how much it would cost, or,
We were doing it in stages.
okay. So if I were to
No,
take,
that was in the original budget.
Yes, yeah.
It was in the original budget.
Right,
okay.
but we
Right, but
started this 3 years ago.
it's one of the items that has been excluded from
Got
the
it.
budget to meet the contingency.
So I've got a total now. If we were to give you an allotment to put you on a 5-year replacement program for your PCs and the laptops, which I think we do want the follow-up item that Mr. Bolito said, that's an incremental 53.4 from your contingency account. And then to do the PD and FD conversion, website conversion, is an extra 10, so you're at 63.4
And then-
out of the $100,000.
And what about the extra printers in case printers break?
Yeah, I know, I'm not there yet.
Okay,
So you're at 63.4
okay.
is what you're at. And that is, and then you have an IT steering committee that you're putting together. Can you guys address where that stands now?
We've had 2 meetings so far. The first meeting was an analysis of what other towns are doing, and we found that we're basically in the middle of the pack here. It's basically, as you get larger, the IT steering committee becomes more effective and useful. Whereas if you're a small town and everybody just talks to everybody and they're all connected, they don't need it. And that's the big thing that I sort of took away from the first meeting. And then the second meeting, we discussed the top 3 things that we're doing well is coming up, and then the top 3 things that you'd like to see IT technology address, where you think IT could help. And the reason we're doing that is, one, we want to let the other departments know what other departments are doing well, so that they can say, hey, that's a great idea, or can we do it over here, or whatever, that type of thing, serendipitous type of things. And then the other thing is to sit there and just analyze what we can do better and, you know, start working on them as projects. Would you like to say anything else? You were at the last meeting.
We talked a lot about, as he was saying, as far as next steps were concerned, doing a business process review to identify what areas would be most synergistic. A lot of talk about duplication of effort and difficulties that our citizenry have doing things like permitting was something that was discussed at length. You know, you have to go here, there, and everywhere to get, you know, your permit for your tent put up and that sort of thing. And then there was talk about productivity things, document retention, archiving, reducing paper costs and printing costs by going more electronic. So a lot of great ideas, you know, I think we have kind of a plan in place about where we want to go. So we had a few takeaway responsibilities, and meet again next month, I think, or is it this month now? And we'll talk more, I think, on business process review and where we're going to go with that.
And then one big thing was sort of with that is just the information flow, is how the information flows through the town, because if you understand your information, you can build your systems properly around it.
Well, that's part of the business process review. So we see where the overlaps are, and so we're, like I said, the synergistic productivity opportunities for both saving people time when they come to the town for something. We talked about web enabling a lot more things.
Front of the house stuff.
Yeah, we want to be cognizant of supporting the consumer on the staff side,
Yeah.
as well as the consumer on, as you put it, the front end.
The, I would just encourage, much like I did when they did Munis, and I think we were marginally successful, I think, in certain areas with Munis, but not as successful as we could have been, based on what my limited knowledge of the internal operations of the business process. I would argue that it's an opportunity for you guys to take a look at every process and not pave the cow path. And I think change is difficult, but I think it's really important that you force change.
Right.
And the efficiencies, because my experience, and I know from Nancy shaking her head, is that people will just say, give me what I have.
Right.
And then you're not taking advantage of the technology.
You're not analyzing the whole process of how it's working and whether you can re-engineer it to get better efficiencies.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Mr. Brown?
What is the Board of Ed's IT budget?
A little over $3 million, if I remember right, 3.2, I think. I don't know, it might be up higher than that now.
About 3?
I think it's roughly 3 and change.
So are these initiatives combined initiatives, all of them?
I don't agree with some of them. Don and I completely disagree about the wide area network.
I'm sorry, about what?
About the wide area network. He's got that on his
For
long-term list.
2016?
Yeah, the contract does expire in 2016. There isn't any new technology out there as far as the wires in the ground. We've already paid for the installation of lighting those wires and connecting our buildings. So what we'll be looking at is the endpoint switches and that sort of thing as far as the way I look at it. His philosophy is different. He wants to take it in-house, have it a municipal area network. I personally think that's too much staffing. I don't think the town's interested in expanding the number of people we have working for us when we can manage it outsourced and have successfully done that for the last, well, since 2005 when we went live with it. I could eat these words if something miraculously comes down the pipe that I'm not aware of by the time the contract's negotiated. But it's been one of those things we've politely agreed to disagree about for a number of years now.
So then, how will that decision be made if we move
Well,
forward?
if I may, there is no disagreement as in that we need WAN work. Decision has not been made how to proceed,
Well, it's also not in this it's not in the budget.
and it's
anyway.
not in the budget yet.
But that wasn't the question that was asked. The question was just asked, how are you guys working together and...
Right, I understand. I just didn't want to get carried away with...
Yeah, I
Yes,
understand.
Thank you.
The other project on the other side of the coin is we have been working together on converting our phone system and moving forward with a request for a capital project to replace that system. We're going to require, some infrastructure work in addition to just the actual handsets, and we've been working on hiring a consultant that would help us build that, the RFP for that project, and researching the various options that are out there. Because that would be, our phone system right now is universal for the town and the Board of Ed, and we would continue to do that.
Right, so, the question is about the initiatives. Are they town and Board of Ed initiatives? Or are they mostly town initiatives? Do you have your own initiatives?
Yeah, that list is really a town list. There is, as we said, there is some synergy, like with the phone system. The Board of Ed has a completely different 3-year plan that actually expires at the end of 2015 that the Board of Ed approved. Our focus has been on, instruction curriculum and our own replacement plan. So, yes, we have a documented plan, but it's not on that piece of paper. Actually, it's on our website if you want to go look at it.
Okay. Anybody else? I have a proposal to make to my colleagues, and see how you guys think about this for now, before I make it a formal amendment or proposed amendment. Thinking out loud, it would appear to me that I can justify, in hardware replacement, broadly defined, of PCs, laptops, and printers, a transfer of $60,000 into the capital outlay account, and the transfer of $10,000 to make sure that the police and fire department are included in the website upgrade or conversion for a total of $70,000. How I arrived to those numbers are 53.4 for the PCs and laptops, which I think puts us, based on what I know, what I've been told, a 5-year replacement program for those items. And so you're at $10,000 for replacements on printers. I split the difference and gave you the additional $6,600 towards printers, which would allocate to you about $16,600 towards printers in total, which gives a total of a transfer of $60,000 from the contingency account for that, and $10,000 based on your estimate for the police and fire. I'm presuming, and I want to ask this question before I get comment from my board members, that the police and fire department are in favor of moving towards this town website at this point and being integrated with that. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, they've had discussions with the First Selectman's office, who is running the website conversion with the library webmaster. Kathleen Griffin has stepped up to the plate to help that because the library webmaster is very busy. And she's also, Ms. Griffin's running the 311 system. And it's all working together because it's all different components of a content management system.
Yeah.
And what was the question? I just lost my track here.
No, if police and fire wanted to.
Oh, right, yeah, so they've been in talk with them, and yes, they're amiable to the situation.
Okay. Does anybody have a? Mr. Stone?
What was your number? I'm sorry.
70,000 in total, 60,000 in capital, 10,000 in professional fees and services.
I know where you're coming from, and I get your figures and everything. I'm just uncomfortable about doing this now. I'd almost rather transfer the money now, and then as the budget season, as we go into budget season, they have a chance to really take a look at what you're coming from, where you're coming from, and maybe have better, not a better presentation, but more facts and figures.
What do you mean? I'm sorry. What would you rather do now?
I'd rather do the 100,000.
Okay, so instead of doing 70, you would
Yeah,
rather do
but I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to do it now. That's just my opinion. I'd rather come to budget season, when we do it in, February, they come with a plan, give the whole presentation with the department, maybe talk to the other departments, and maybe revamp the whole way the IT department's working.
I agree with you there. I'm just trying to get them through this year, because
Yeah, I
this is
know.
all related to this year.
All right, well, that's...
Mrs. Albin, you had your, please.
I too understand, I believe, your approach, but I would ask the fiscal officer his opinion about that, given he has been working closely with the IDT department on this as a budgetary item.
I would like 75,000.
72.
What did you just, I'm sorry,
He wants
Did you say 75, and you're comfortable if we were to move that number?
What is the 75? What is the extra 5? And I'll go to Mr. Leslie.
The only reason I say is because I remember when I went through it in detail, when this first happened way back when, I came up with, to make this through the year without any, very, very tight, but doable at 75, doing some of the very same calculations that you've just done. But I came up at 75, and I don't remember the exact.
Probably the printers.
And I don't have the, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if the fiscal officer is comfortable with that number, we have spent hours upon hours on this item. We've had an extremely detailed presentation this evening. If you may, I will make the motion because the chairman usually doesn't. I will make a motion to amend this item to $75,000 and look for someone to second that.
Seconding. Okay, so just the amendment is before us to amend the item as to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the chief fiscal officer to transfer $75,000 from the IT contingency account to IT fees and professional services. So we're just voting on the amendment? Yes, actually, thank you. We'll do 65, or I'm sorry, we'll do, Mrs. Albin, you need to make this. So can you do, I believe what we want to do is 65,000 to capital and 10,000 to fees and services. Just so-
65,000 to capital and 10,000 to fees and services.
What?
All, the 100,000 was taken out of fees and professional services and put into IT. There is the money in capital now for everything.
Excellent. Okay.
So the point being is, if you're going to move the money, the 75 needs to go back into fees and professional services, and I would ask the board's indulgence to let me leave the 25,000 in IT contingency, and if there's an emergency, I can use it.
Ask for it.
You can ask for it, yeah. We didn't say we're getting rid of the 25, we're just
No,
leaving
no, I'm
it
not
as
saying
a-
you're getting rid of the 25,
That'll
but the
stay
point being is, you meet monthly, and I might have an emergency in the middle of the month.
Let us know.
Okay.
So back to my amended motion, which is to hold, I'm amending a motion which says to hold over the item, consider and act upon request of the chief fiscal officer to transfer $100,000 from IT contingency to fees and professional services. I will amend that to read $75,000.
Mr. Bolito, second? Second. Okay, all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Abstentions? The item's before us is amended. The item now reads to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the chief fiscal officer to transfer $75,000 from the account IT contingency to IT fees and professional services. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? This item is finally done. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the follow-up.
I'd
All
like
right.
to thank Mr. Mayor especially for helping me with this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, and Nancy.
Mrs. Albin, thank you for your amendment. The other item, it's just a love fest up here, everybody thanking each other. Okay. Last item on the agenda to hear, consider and act upon any communications. As I indicated earlier, I do not have any, but I did want to alert the board to a conversation a follow-up conversation that I had with Mr. Tetreault. and that was something, unfortunately, Mr. Walsh had a conflict arise at the last minute this evening, but I have asked him for this, for his, for your guys' bond, or rather the fund balance meeting, or committee. I think we want to hold a joint meeting with our board and the Board of Selectmen at a time, a date certain, that we can get Mr. Spurndle here, that he can walk us through the new bond rating agency's thoughts on the criteria for keeping the AAA rating, including fund balance policies and other questions. I think it'd behoove not just our board, but the Board of Selectmen to hear that conversation, particularly with the good work that's going on with our Fund Balance Committee. Okay? So we'll try to get that on one of our regularly scheduled meetings moving forward after we do our organizational meeting and the like. But that is something that Mr. Tetra and I did speak about, and I just wanted to alert the board to that as you guys move forward. Any questions, comments, concerns from anybody? Yes, I'll go to Mr. Brockfeld.
Yeah, it's just a personal comment, if you don't mind.
Sure.
At the last meeting, you were kind enough to allow some of the people who were running to speak, which I thought was very nice. I didn't get a chance because I am not running.
Feel free.
But I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Bolito for his time on the board and service. He's become a close personal friend of mine, and honestly, it's a true loss for the board. On the other hand, I know he intends to stay involved in the town affairs, and so I wish you the best of luck in anything you do going forward, and thanks again.
And Mr. Mayor.
It's been a great pleasure working for Splito, and if anybody wants to go to the Angus, I'll buy the first drink in your honor. We're actually getting out before 10. One business item, however. At the December meeting, you normally vote on the year's schedule.
Yes.
So to have a mutually developed schedule available for the December meeting, the Finance Department needs to meet with the Budget Committee or with whoever is going to be
Yes.
bringing that to the board.
Yeah, I would ask that the two members of the Budget Committee, who will still be on the board, Mr. Stone and Mr. DeWitt, to touch base with you.
Thank you very much.
And do that. Sure. Mr. Tetra. It was my assumption that they were. So absolutely, that's got to be coordinated with the Board of Selectmen as well. Thank you, Mr. Tetra. I, too, want to add my thanks to Mr. Bolito. It's been a privilege and an honor. You've done great things for your hometown. It's been a pleasure to serve with you. It's been a pleasure to have you as my vice chairman. And for all your hard work and effort, not only your colleagues here, but the taxpayers and citizens of Fairfield owe you a debt. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So with that, you want to make the last motion? A motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Mr. Brockfeld. All those in favor of adjournment? All those opposed? Good night, everybody. Thank you.